Hello, I'm Monica Kuzminskaite. I'm health and nutrition psychologist, and this is my podcast. Today we talk about fat consumption and fat accumulation. We're continually learning more about how the human body processes nutrients obtained from food and how various processes interact with one another. Unfortunately, we sometimes still behave as we once read or knew and continue to struggle. Or even worse, we harm our bodies. Fat is currently one of the hottest topics. Let's check whether the efforts we devote to this goal are effective. Over the past few years, there have been significant changes in the scientific approach to fat consumption and fat accumulation. No one disputes the fundamental principle that a calorie deficit is necessary to reduce existing fat reserves. However, the approach has shifted to a general recommendation to reduce fat intake with more attention paid to the internal fat production process. Scientists and practitioners have always highly regarded the Mediterranean diet. This diet recommends eating plenty of unsaturated fats and fiber, and the fat content can be pretty high. However, the Mediterranean diet is not associated with being overweight, even if the total calorie intake is not restricted. It means that products rich in valuable nutrients, as well as the interaction between these nutrients, play a more critical role. Nutrient metabolism becomes more efficient, resulting in an increased sense of satiety. As a result, there is no need to restrict food intake consciously, and the body responds to this process naturally and appropriately to the signals stimulated by the nutrients. Using this opportunity, a reminder, the Mediterranean diet is a meal plan that includes a variety of vegetables and fruits, legumes, nuts, seeds, olive oil, whole grains, fish and seafood, and limited amounts of sweet foods, fatty dairy products, and red meat. Studies compare recommendations to limit carbohydrates in the diet with the recommendations to limit fat in the diet. Both approaches are popular diets and they yield significant initial results, but they have different harmful effects over a period of 12 to 24 months. The goal is to obtain enough fat and carbohydrates from healthy foods, both, not limit one or another. Unhealthy fats include industrially produced trans fats, such as those found in margarine, and easily absorbed carbohydrates are unhealthy carbs, such as sugar, glucose, and especially fructose. And when I say enough, that's not an exact number. Realistically, it is much easier to ensure two things: that your diet includes plenty of healthy sources of carbohydrates, such as vegetables, fruits, and whole grains, and as few as possible unhealthy sources of carbohydrates, such as sweets, added sugar, juices, and carbonated soft drinks, and that there will be significantly more of the healthy ones. It's not really practical to dive into the discussion of how much is enough and how much we should eat because that will be a very difficult task to measure. Another area of research is the assessment of body health. Increasing research results indicate that the worst health condition is characterized by visceral fat accumulating around the abdominal organs, rather than overall body mass index, and certainly not the overall body mass. Unfortunately, measuring internal abdominal fat is not as easy as stepping on a scale, but for the sake of example, let's say that if you have a so-called beer belly, this is a good enough indicator that you have way too much abdominal fat. It is worth repeating that the body does not store fat obtained from food directly in adipose tissue. Fat, like other nutrients, is broken down and then all the substances necessary for the body are synthesized from its components, and it doesn't mean that fat is produced from the fat. Most fat is produced in the liver and adipose tissue and usually from excess carbohydrates, not from fats. If excess carbohydrates, especially fructose, and high insulin levels are constant long-term condition, this stimulates the body internal fat production and storage response. The body is adapted to respond to isolated episodes of excess carbohydrates, but a constant excess is the cause of metabolic disorders. The current recommendation to limit fat intake when applied indiscriminately can have undesirable consequences. This type of diet typically increases carbohydrate intake. It is becoming increasingly challenging to determine and comprehend the carbohydrate content of foods, especially if we rely on the processed foods. Therefore, the general trend of choosing natural foods and products made from them is easier to implement in practice than carefully reading labels and having sufficient knowledge to understand the complex names of chemicals in the food. Studies also show that consuming adequate amounts of saturated fat while limiting carbohydrates can lead to lower body fat, despite the common assumption that the opposite is true. More fat in food can lead to less fat in your body if you limit carbohydrates. It appears that hyperinsulinemia, which is elevated insulin levels caused by constant excess of carbohydrates, is the main factor in fat accumulation. It's not only a consequence of developed insulin resistance, but also its cause. There is a closed cycle around this. Excessive carbohydrate intake also leads to hyperglycemia, dyslipidemia, high inflammation markers, metabolic syndrome, and fatty liver disease. In addition, excessive insulin levels in the body inhibit fat breakdown and promote fat production. So once again, excess of carbohydrates leads to higher body weight, which we don't want. The gut microbiota of overweight and obese people have specific composition. Some gut bacteria affect natural fat metabolism mechanisms in a way that releases the brake on fat accumulation. To prevent these types of bacteria from dominating the gut, it is necessary to consume a variety of plant-based foods which feed the beneficial bacteria and thus contribute to a healthier and more natural fat metabolism. It is what nutritional science says. From psychological perspective, I would like to add that accurate and reliable knowledge, the application of appropriate attitudes and habits that are adequate to reality, the ability to tolerate minor discomfort when changing habits, and taking small steps toward better health are well-known and proven methods. There is nothing in our complex and diverse mind that we cannot change or adapt. There is no universal reason why we cannot change our behavior in a way that is most beneficial to us in the long term. The habits you have formed in the past will bring you happiness here and now, but the habits you form today will also save you from the problems in the future. The voice that wants candy is a voice from the past, and it will not lead you to a bright future. Incidentally, that voice usually says, "So what? I need to feel good right now." But that is not the voice that cares about your health and well being for years to come. Therefore, I recommend relying on knowledge and acting in the best way we know how to feel good for a long time to come. That's all for now. I'm Monica Kuzminskaite. I'm a health and nutrition psychologist, and I help to resolve simple and complicated issues of emotions, behavior, and thinking. I write, I give lectures, and I provide psychological counseling, and you will find the link to register for a counseling session under each post. You will find my posts in social media, searching for my name or for keyword spoonful of reason. Wishing you peace and serenity.